So hedge to arrive contracts have been around a while, and they're known by different names in different parts of the world. So if you hear HTA stands for hedge to arrive, futures first, futures only, those are all different names for a hedge to arrive or HTA contract. What are we doing with an HTA or hedge to arrive? We're just locking in that futures component. So we mentioned that you could work directly with the StoneX broker to use futures contracts to manage price risk. That's essentially what we're doing with an HTA. HTA is no different than a short futures hedge that you could do on your own. The difference is that the margin required to manage that futures position is usually dealt with by the person that's writing the cash contract. So the grain elevator, StoneX Commodity Solutions, someone of that sort. Now for this reason, there is a fee for HTAs typically, not always, but it is common to see an HTA fee anytime you do one of these contracts. And that's simply because that entity writing the contract is going to be managing that hedge from a margin standpoint for you as that contract is active. Now, why would you use an HTA contract? What is the benefit of splitting that futures component away from the basis piece? Well, simply if we're looking to do a cash contract at a time when futures prices are attractive but basis is weak, well, let's go ahead and lock that futures component in with an HTA and set basis at a later date. Some pitfalls to look for when using HTAs is keeping in mind that there is a second decision that must be made there, and that is, when do I set that basis? As a farmer myself, I've seen many instances in which producers such as yourself waited to the least opportune time, which is typically harvest time, to make that basis decision and wound up locking in a very unattractive basis level. So keep that in mind if you are utilizing this type of a contract. This can be done with your grain buyer or with StoneX Commodity Solutions, but that basis component must be locked in at a later date, and make sure we're watching basis levels to determine when and how that should be done. When we start looking into contracts that have optionality, we have to understand one thing. We are buying the right to a futures price, not the obligation to use it. So as we looked at with the HTA previously, we were short a futures contract. So we were obligated to that price. We were protected from lower prices and couldn't participate in higher prices. If we move to using a put option as our risk management strategy, now we have the right to that price, still protected from lower prices, and can also take advantage of higher prices. Sounds pretty good, right? So, well, there's a drawback, as there always is. We have to pay a premium for this right. So think of option contracts like price insurance, right? We're ensuring that that price, a lower price, won't impact our profitability while retaining the ability to take advantage of higher prices. So let's just consider an example of the proper use of a put option. So we have corn trading at $4 a bushel today, and we are in a position to where $4 corn is a price that we want to manage, but are also thinking that we could see higher prices. Definitely don't want to see lower, but want to take advantage of them if they go higher. So we would look to the put option, and let's say if we did buy that put option today, it would cost us 40 cents a bushel to do so. So we're going to spend 40 cents a bushel to protect that $4 futures price and retain the ability to capture better prices if the market would move above $4. So collars are a very common strategy and often used in risk management when producers are using options to manage risk. And what a collar does is reduces the cost of the strategy. Of course, there's always a trade-off. By reducing that cost, we also have to reassume some risk. So we just talked about that put option strategy, right? We were going to spend 40 cents a bushel to protect a $4 futures price. And that price tag, at least in my opinion, is pretty steep. That gives us a 3 360 corn price that we're protecting by the time we pay for that put option. So if we take the 40 cents a premium off the price we're protecting, we're left with 360 corn, which might not work for our budgets. So we have to find a way to reduce the cost of that strategy, and we could do so by using this collar strategy. Now, collars, like everything else, go by a number of different names. Sometimes they're called collars or fences or risk reversals. Like everything in finance, we have to have a bunch of different names for the same thing. So if we're going to use this strategy, we would buy the $4 put just like we did previously, but simultaneously we would also turn around and sell perhaps a $4.50 call option. Now, by selling that call option, that is going to limit the amount of upside potential that we can participate in if this market would rally. And that's going to be defined by that call strike of $4.50. However, if we collect 20 cents for selling that call option, that's going to reduce the cost of the strategy. Now, instead of costing 40 cents total, it'll be the net of what we paid and what we collected, which is only 20 cents. The beauty about this collar strategy is that you have a lot of different alternatives because you can select different price levels to impact the overall cost of the strategy. For instance, we could move to an out of the money or a put option below the $4 market, or we could look at a call option that is either higher or lower, which will affect the price, net price of the strategy. Now, when we move to averaging contracts, we're moving into a different family of financial contracts, and that is contracts that are in the OTC or over-the-counter market. An averaging contract is a great contract, and I think it's something that every producer should consider for at least a portion of their expected sales. You know, as we talked about earlier, there's volatility in the market, and there's usually a lot of volatility in those summer months as the crop are growing, and that translates in most years, not all years, but probably 9 out of 10, that translates into some of our best opportunities to make marketing decisions. Now, we also said that nobody knows what the right day is, right? We know that time frame is probably going to be some of our best opportunities, but we don't know exactly when in that time frame we should pull the trigger. That's where the averaging contract comes in. Let's define a window of time that we want to average sales over. So what we would do if we use this averaging contract is dedicate a known number of bushels and a known time frame to this particular contract, and that will automatically make sales relative to the day settlement price every day over that time period, which we would try to target that seasonal strength. So every year is going to be different, and every marketing scenario is going to be different. And that's why we have so many contracts. These different contracts hone in on different components of that cash price and help you to manage those independently, that being futures and basis. Now, there's people out there that say you should only use put options, and there's people out there that say you should only do forward contracts. And really, I don't think that's the best approach. The best thing that I know to do is to diversify the types and timing of contracts as you go throughout the calendar year. And that's why we're here, to learn about all of our different alternatives. Obviously, there's tendencies in the market that we can leverage particular contracts to take advantage of. That's not going to be appropriate every day of the year. So the best thing you can do is understand all of your alternatives and make sure that you're diversifying your risk in contract type, just like we are in timing and use of contracts to market grain.